We've come to Maundy Thursday in Holy Week, the beginning of the great 3 days, the Triduum as it's known in the Church. It's one great 3-day commemoration of the final events in Jesus' earthly ministry. It begins at a dinner table with his disciples, it journeys on to the foot of the cross, and it ends in the proclamation of Easter, the triumph of life over death, Jesus' resurrection. We enter the story today, this evening, on Maundy Thursday, in the Gospel of John, with Jesus sitting around the table with his disciples, with his friends. Jesus recognizes that his time has come. In the Gospel of John in particular, Jesus is always moving forward with a sense of where he's going and a sense that he's come to accomplish something. And it says in today's section of this gospel, Jesus realized that the time had come and that his time with his disciples was growing short. So he gets up from the dinner table and removes, in essence, his dinner jacket and puts on a servant's towel and starts to wash their feet. In this, Jesus both brings forward an act of love and service, but also brings into the room a tremendous amount of disorientation. You hear it in the disciples' exchange with him. Well, you're not supposed to be doing this for us. You're the teacher. When Jesus has washed all their feet and sits down again, he says to them, yes, you'll understand this more later. I am the teacher. And if I can wash your feet, then you can wash one another's feet. And it is in this that he gives them and us the new commandment. That's where Maundy comes from, mandatum, commandment. He gives them the commandment that they are to love one another. Love one another as he has loved them. And they will know that you are my disciples, he says. The world will know that you are my disciples by how you love one another. I found this to be true myself in an experience I had as a church person some time ago when I was the mother of young children. I was newly back to the church, probably about 2 years. I was at that time still more of a seeker than a believer, I would have said at the time. I was involved in church, but not that much. And into this set of circumstances was born my fourth child, my youngest child, who had a difficult birth and wound up in the neonatal intensive care unit for a month. My family, with 3 young children and 1 in the hospital, my family was stretched thin. We were exhausted and we were afraid. And into this fear and exhaustion came a phone call from a friendly voice, a person from the church who said, we're wondering if it might be helpful to you if we were to bring you some meals, if that might be helpful and might help ease your burden. I said, what a lovely idea, gave them the parameters for our family's meals and hung up the phone, not thinking much about it. And what was transformative about those meals, it was wonderful to get them and it was a wonderful respite for us, but it wasn't as much the meals as who brought them that brought a change in my understanding about the church. Because the first few people who showed up were in fact the people I'd made as friends at church, people who were happy to see me. I was happy to see them and exchange a word of encouragement with one another. But then one day, a week or so into this, the bell rang and it was another person from church. It was a person who, frankly, I didn't think liked me very much. I wasn't a huge fan of hers either, and yet there she was on my porch with a bag of Boston Market for 5, and she said, we brought along a chocolate cake just in case. That was the beginning of a transformation for me in how I understood what the church was. I was surprised by her presence. I was humbled by her presence. And in fact, further on in the week and the weeks ahead, there were people who showed up from the church that I'd never laid eyes on and who I'd not met and didn't even know the name of, but there they were on my front porch, bringing sustenance and bringing encouragement, the physical manifestation of God's love for me and my family, and help in that time of trouble. We are in a similar time of being stretched thin now, this Maundy Thursday in 2020, where so much around us is happening that has left us disoriented and unsure of what we are to do next. Many of us, most of us, I presume, are stretched very thin. We are exhausted and we are afraid. And it is into exactly this kind of chaos and confusion that Jesus was speaking to his disciples back in that upper room, where he said, in the midst of all that is to come, it is important that you remember this one thing, that I command you to love one another as I have loved you. We in the church are in a place where, in the midst of all that is stretching and straining those around us, we can be that sort of love, that sort of disorienting and surprising love that comes into the world in places where it is least expected. And we are now in a place where we cannot gather, but once we come back to that time and place where we will be able to gather as a community more like what has been normal for us in the past, we will come into that new reality changed by this time, changed by our longing and our desire to be with one another, to wash one another's feet, to care for one another in these physical ways. Unable to do so now, but able to hold that future hope for that time where we will be able to love one another in ways that disorient and surprise. Not only those who are on the receiving end of those gestures, but for us to look and understand that we have become those people that Jesus encouraged his disciples, encourages us to be. That we are to be ones who love one another, regardless of station, regardless of the relationship, but simply to love, to be a vehicle of the love that Christ has given us. And so as we walk on into the rest of this 3-day commemoration, as we walk with Jesus, let us hold fast to that great commandment that he has given us, that we are to be Christ's hands and feet in the world. We are to be Christ's heart. We are to be Christ's love. Let us go forward, showing the world what it means to be a follower of Christ. Let them know us and recognize us by the way we love one another and all whom we meet. Amen.